How's everybody doing out there? I hope you all are watching. If not, we want you to get every leader, everybody dealing with the church on. We got to get this off of my chest. Been hearing some things about something that has been long standing, and so I want to make sure that we get this out. If you are a leader, if you know leaders, get them on this or either share this live with them. Invite other people to come on because we are going to be talking about pass the baton, the church will live. Hey, what's going on, Apostle Charles Morris? Thank you for chiming in. We need to talk about this tonight. So first, before I go on any further, let me lay some disclaimers out there so that no one will get mixed up anything that I'm about to say. First of all, I want to say that I am going to talk about something that has been a major issue within the church. But I'm not one of those people who are, now that something is wrong with the church, you need to leave the church. This is not that type of party. And a matter of fact, I go on to say that we all need the church, those of us who are true believers, those of us who are true Christians. As a matter of fact, if you think you can live without the ecclesia, without the church, you think you can live without God. So this is not that type of party. Also, with what I'm going to share tonight, I just want to let you guys know that it is all right to embark upon what I'm about to tell you, while at the same time, I'm never going to encourage you to be disrespectful. I'm never going to encourage you, whatever you need to handle and make right tonight, you can do that with the utmost respect and with the biblical fruits of the Spirit. Lastly, I want to let you know that because I'm not teaching on the importance of fathers and different things like that, don't mean that I am not for that. Why? Because sometimes when we teach on something, when we rant on something, people want to believe that we may be against the opposite or the balance of the story. That is not the case. So what am I here to talk about tonight? The church's problem, the leader's problem, the system's problem about not passing the baton on. Now, I get it. The balance to this is make sure we got to understand the importance of the fathers. You know, we turning the hearts of the sons back to the fathers. I get all that. Not only am I for that because that's biblical, but guess what? The reason why I'm not teaching on that tonight is because I know when it comes to this subject, we always hear that, and we very rarely hear what I'm about to share. Isn't it amazing that when you look at the church, it seems like the enemy got enough sense to start calling the younger and developing the younger, even at an early age. But when it comes to the church, we say you're young at 50 and 60 years old. Why is it that when you look at professional sports, you are considered, see, I like watching basketball, I like watching the NBA, right? And you are considered old or past your prime when you are in your 30s. Oh, but when it comes to the church, we want to ordain you and give you a chance to preach for your first time when you're 65. Who does that? What about the NFL? What about professional sports? We know that we call the younger because they are strong. How about this? Have you ever thought about this? How old was Jesus when he started ministry? How old was the disciples that he pastored when he sent them? How long did Jesus spend time discipling the disciples? 3 years. But when it comes to church, we have people that has been with us for 3 decades. And we say they are called to preach, but they still are not ready. People, I'm here to say that something is very wrong with that picture, and this is a widespread problem. I am hearing about manipulative leaders because you don't want your shine to be stolen. You will smother the gifts of God's people. I want to let you know that blood is going to be on your hands. See, the church is much like normal life. There's so many different parallels. Normal life teaches us that we raise children not to be children. We raise children to be adults one day. But how is it that everywhere else they got a great recruiting program except the church? We would wait till someone collects AARP to commission them out of ministry. But see, it's amazing that the Bible consider people old that we consider people young. And because there's been a lot of leaders smothering people out there, you don't want to let go of that nice old little armor bearer because they do a good job. And so you would rather, because of your comforts, hold on to them instead of release them to what God has called them to do. What about when the world looks at us as being just as political as the church, being just as political as the world? Would that be because maybe when they look and see that here's someone that's more eligible for ministry, but because they please the pastor, because they paid consistently, because they serve in a way that stroke the ego of the leader, the leader's going to bump them up in the discipleship program. Oh, but they'll tell you you're not ready yet. Let me tell the leaders something. You do know that just because someone don't please you or your ego still don't mean that they are not ready to please God and whatever their calling is in life. There is life. The church will live. We have to pass on the baton. And so there's too many people out there that know exactly what I'm talking about. You have been waiting. You know that God is calling you to preach. Your leaders have even admitted that you have been called to pastor in ministry, but you still are set on the shelf. We will give you a collar and you still never get to preach in church. The church, there's a certain level of life that is waiting in the pews. And then we sit and find a church just because it's grandmama's church, and we'll sit there until we rot and die. Some of y'all have needed to have been left where you are. And there again, my disclaimer before I started this rant was do whatever you do. You can still do it respectfully and in a manner that is pleasing to God. But you know God has been told you to leave that place. What about it? Most people plateau when they grow to a certain level in church and there's no way to go. So now what the leaders do, they recycle their maturity back into immaturity just so they can be comfortable with them staying around there. Because after all, good help is hard to find. What about it, leaders? Will you allow your brand of church to die if it means the kingdom will benefit? Because we do know the kingdom is larger than just our individual churches. What about it, denominations? What about this Nicolaitans, this witchcraft, this type of control that these leaders are having to whereas you are literally suffocating the people because you won't release the people in where God has called them to be? God rest his soul, my bishop, my late pastor, Pastor Otis Lockett, I heard him say this. He says, it is time to graduate God's people. And indeed, it has been past time. But our leaders, the reason why so much of the church and the faith can't go on is because the people who should be developed to help us on this battlefield are still waiting in the pews on Sunday to hear us preach. Oh, what about you who have acknowledged that you got leaders that need to be leaders, but you say they're not ready yet. But then you set them aside and say, just wait. No. That's not the Jesus way. Because true, we don't want to release anybody out before their time. We don't want to release anybody out and they're not developed. But are you actively involved in developing them? Don't send anybody on the shelf for 5 and 10 years and just say they're not ready yet. You're robbing life of not only them, you're robbing life of not only you, you are literally taking away life from the church. Because God has assigned that person a couple individuals who they're going to develop. We got to get out of this. We are the only ones that can do it right. And if we don't do it, it won't be done right. What about you leaders that have 10 and 20 and 30 people who got collars in your church, but the people never hear them preach and perform, and you get mad because you say, listen, y'all ain't got to come to me for everything, but guess what? They only trust you because they never see anybody else perform. There is a sickness that has been going on for a long time in the church, for a long time in denominationalism, for a long time in sectarianism, because we have not we have failed at passing the baton the way that Jesus wants us to. See, we got to stop treating people like we own them as members and started treating them as God's property who we're just called to simply steward. There are pastors that have never been called, that have been called a pastor. They haven't been called because they are waiting on their leader who is insecure to release them. That's not the Jesus way. What about the Jesus way? We preach Jesus while we reject his way of pastoring. Let's look at what he did to the disciples. He didn't look at them and say, you're not ready to pastor yet, so I'm going to just sit you passively here just to listen at me preach. Because listening at your sermons is just not enough to develop people for training and leadership. I want you to get your leaders. They need to hear this because people are dying because of this, you all. So what was the Jesus way? Jesus looked at the disciples, and the first thing he did, he says, come. It was a very simple rule that we very rarely see. Jesus says, come first of all and be with me. First of all, access. He says, come and be with me. He says, then you're going to watch me do, and then we're going to do together, and then I'm going to watch you do. I'm going to observe you do, and then I will be confident enough to be able to send you out to do the work. How is it that someone has been under your care for 20 years and they're still not ready for ministry? Again, Jesus discipled the disciples for 3 years. But we say they're young. There's a difference in between being young in the faith, because you can be a young man and still be an elder in the gospel. If we understand that, and when we translate that word elder biblically, it means two things. It just don't mean a positional elder. It also means a person of age that have been seasoned, that have been around the faith for a certain period of time, that they have been proven to carry on the gospel. Pastors, I am telling you, there are pastors that are dying in your pews that come to your church every Sunday morning, and you are overlooking the jewels. And we are saying, where's our help? Guess what? We haven't raised our help because we're too busy still seeing them like the little babies that we helped raise. If I look at my daughter 20, 30 years from now and still try to treat her as if she's 7, something is wrong with that. And the people are dying in the pews. What about even if you're just not called to preach, but you've been in that church for 30 years? I've said this before. The worst thing that any church could have behind it is a graveyard, because it sends a signal to the living that I find this place and I sit here until I die. The jewels, their gifts are being smothered and they're dying every Sunday within the pews. And I want to get this message out because there's been too many stories that are going on right now of leaders being too controlling, smothering the people too much, and acting like gods before the people. You don't own any member. You are there to steward God's property. And are you stewarding it right? Not if you're not releasing the way that God would like you to. Not if you're waiting till they get. Who does that? Why are you 75 years old and you're just preaching your trial sermon? Nowhere else in the world does that make sense. We need to call the young because they are strong. But the church will wait until you're 70. What about it? What about the leaders who still want to try to pastor at 80 and 90 years old? You still trying to pastor when you got 1 foot in the grave, 1 foot in the hospital emergency room, and you try to keep the 3rd foot in the pulpit. That's because we don't know how to raise our help. And then release them that they don't have to do it just like we did it, as long as they're doing it with the fragrance that does not hinder the gospel message. Don't just say they're not ready yet and not actively and set them on the shelf. Actively be involved if you are a father in raising these. You know what I'm talking about. Get your friends, get your family. Some of you right now are feeling exactly what I'm saying. You're in the church under a manipulative leader that will give you a collar but won't let you minister. Or you have seen, what about you all that have seen people who you know and everybody else know, it ain't just you, that less eligible people have been passed on to pastor in ministry. You want to know why that is? Because we have made it political. Leaders, denominations, I remind you, people don't have to please you and your ego to release them for them to be ready to minister on the Lord's behalf. So what about for the older leader? Let me help bless your life. You leaders that are older, are you still necessary? You better believe it. I think about the NBA. I think about the game of basketball. Isn't it amazing that people who coach understand this? That after I become in my 30s and my late 30s as a basketball player, if the game of basketball is going to get the most out of my life, I have to understand the importance of transitioning to going from a player to a coach. And I'm telling some of you all older leaders, transition from being a player to being a coach. Coaching these younger people and pushing them out, because the army of God is suffering in the earth realm simply because we are not passing the baton like we need to. Because you want to know why? Just like a Honda, we are trying to ride the pulpit until the wheels fall off of it. But I'm here to tell you, we're preaching and we'll say it, but we don't live it. Ministry, even what we call our churches and ministries, is beyond us. But it's going to die when you die if you don't understand that. What about your personal life? You leaders that are older, hear this word, some of you prophetically. Your life will be spared, expanded, and just a little bit longer if you understand this. Allow the people to pick more from your brain, from your head, and less from your hands. It's going to prolong your life a little bit. You want to know why? Because the hands signify doing. Too many of y'all still trying to do ministry. You're flying all over the place when you need to allow those people. You have paid your dues already. We're not disrespecting you. We're respecting you and say, you have paid your dues long enough to where people need to come to you and pick from your brain. They don't need to ask you, what do you think about older parents? Does it make sense for you got an 80 and 90-year-old mother or father, and you're going to still ask them to do all that they did when they was a middle-aged person? No, the older they get, the more you allow you do work for them and make it easier for them. And this is how it should be in ministry. Older leaders, stop trying to pastor because you still need your ego to get stroked, because you don't know the beauty of transitioning, like I said, passing the baton. Because not only is it killing you, it's killing the leaders that's supposed to have already took your place 5 years ago. So I am crying because I love, and we know that everybody is important. But because of witchcraft manipulation, because of this Nicolaitans doctrine, and y'all, let's be honest. Everybody's afraid to talk about this type of stuff because you don't want to make your leader upset. Or the leader don't want to make their denominational higher ups upset. Because nobody want to talk about the smothering that is going on. Because the church is one of the worst places in the whole wide world when it comes to good recruiting. And I'm just not talking about throwing young people out there just to throw them out there. They got to be eligible, just like the Bible says, but at least they're not dying in the pews. What about you prophets that have been reduced to just being parking lot prophets because you can't never get the mic in service, knowing that your prophetic call has already been validated? What about it? Oh, because the church have figured out a way that they can capitalize while not discipling. I want to leave you guys with this, and I'm done. I'm almost done. See, we just had the Olympics. And think about passing the baton. And we know really in the African American community, we see this a lot. When it comes to not only passing the baton in church, passing the baton in our businesses, passing the baton of homes, when family members pass and go on, we are terrible at putting wills and stuff in place, succession plans in place, because we fail to realize, guess what? People got to live after we die. Our loved ones, the people that benefited from our life, still have to go on. But we are not good at passing the baton. Anybody would say that we are a team, right? pastors, up and coming pastors, past leaders and different things are like this. Well, if we are a team, think about that team that's on the relay race. We just had the Olympics. You really want to know the reality of it? It doesn't matter if you are the fastest team, the most athletic team, the most gifted team. If you don't know how to pass the baton in the relay race, the most gifted, the strongest, the fastest team can still lose. Simply because you don't know the art of passing the baton the correct way. I hope something has been said that has been an encouragement to you guys. And I hope you have heard my heart. Go back and look at the disclaimers at the beginning of this live and understand that, listen, we have to get witchcraft out of the pulpit. We have to get insecure leaders out of the pulpit. We have to get ministers that have a need to be needed out of the pulpit. And we have to graduate God's people. Because if not, the church will continue to suffer because of it. Please pass this live on to someone else. And I hope something has been said that has been a blessing to you guys. Thank you so much. God bless.